Okay, so my marker rolls across the page. All right, so we're into the lesson. So the first thing I want to show you, there's really two sheets we're going to be using for today's lesson, and I sent all of these sheets to your parents' emails, so hopefully they got these printed off for you. If they're not printed off, it's not going to make it impossible, but it's nice to have these. And what I did is I actually kind of created my own dry erase board by putting the papers inside of a Ziploc bag. So these aren't the small quart size, these are the big ones that are called a gallon size. So if you have it printed off, you'll need this place value chart with decimals. Pop that into a bag, and then the other one you need today is the decimal grid. Excuse me, I got the hiccup there. So the decimal grid that has tenths on the top and hundredths on the bottom. And we're gonna be working with that one today too, okay? So the first thing that I wanted to go over with you is just, I told you in our introduction, we were gonna be reviewing place value. So on our place value chart, you can see that, we have numbers if they go all the way out to 10,000, thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones. But now, where we focused pretty much on all of these numbers all year long, now we're going to focus on numbers that are on the right side of the place value chart, which for this unit is going to be limited to tenths and hundredths. So the important thing to remember is that when I have a tenth or I have a 100th, they always come after the decimals. And you guys know, if I go from one place value column to the next one, how many times bigger is that next number going to be? So going from this one to this one, that makes this number, and hopefully you're shouting out the answers to me right now, of 10 times bigger. If I go from here to here, this number is going to be 10 times bigger. So that's kind of pulling off what we've been working on already this year. The same thing holds true when you have numbers in the other side of the decimal. So if I'm going from tenths to hundredths, now I'm still going to know that this is going to be 10 times as I go here, but instead of getting 10 times bigger, I'm actually moving the opposite way. A number here to here, this number is actually 10 times smaller than this number. So this number is my bigger number, all right? Now, it makes sense because if I look from here and go ones to tens, this number is 10 times bigger. But if I go backwards, tens to ones, the ones number is 10 times smaller than what the tens number is. So like with this one, if my number was 10 and I move backwards 10 times, my number's 1. So 1 is 10 times smaller than 10. So the same thing happens here. If I have a number after the decimal, now one number after the decimal is going to be tenths. Always, 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 always just one number. If you got two numbers after the decimal, you're not looking at tenths anymore. You're looking at hundredths. Now, I always have to have two numbers after the decimal when I go to 100ths, all right? So 10 times more in a smaller direction than 1/10 is going to be 10 hundredths. So I say this one because he's in the tenths place value. This is 1/10. This is 10 hundredths. And what we're going to be finding out is that these two numbers, even though they're in different place values, are actually equivalent equivalent decimals. I'm going to say equivalent fractions a lot because that's what we've been doing. But these are equivalent decimals. They actually equal the same thing, all right? So we're going to be pulling out this place value chart from time to time. The good news is if you put it in the baggie, if you brought home an eraser or you have an eraser at home, you can actually erase everything right off of here, or you can go up into your sock drawer and pull out a sock just like we were using in class. Use that for an eraser or a Kleenex, whatever is going to get it done, okay? So I'm going to set this one aside, and then I'm going to kind of get us into our focus of our lesson for today. So you need to pull out this sheet. So this sheet actually has different sets of like grids broken up into tenths and hundredths. And the way you want to look at these, they're kind of on top of each other, okay? We're going to show how things are equivalent. So in my tenths grid, you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 tenths. 10 tenths makes 100, right? Well, if you look down below, you can see that these are exactly the same size. And in fact, if I go down, you can still see that there are still 10 tenths here. But the different thing that they did on the hundredths grid is they made horizontal lines going across as well and broke that into a grid of 10 times 10, which is 100. So the basic idea of our lesson is this. So let's say I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to color in 1/10, okay? Now, 1/10, if I'm going to write it as a fraction, looks like that. Because today we're kind of focusing on fractions and not so much on decimals. We're going to get there with decimals, but we're going to kind of carry over fractions a little bit. So 1/10. Now, if I go directly below that 1/10 and I color in the same shape, all right? I don't want to color it all the way in because I want you to see the individual lines. How many of these little individual 1 boxes are colored in? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 out of how many's total at the bottom here? 100. So in hundredths, 1/10 is the same as 10 hundredths. Now, if your brain is starting to do some little things and start thinking, wait a minute, 1 to 10 and 10 to hundreds. What did they do to go from tenths to hundredths? Well, they must have multiplied it by 10, right? Because 1 times 10 is 10, and 10 times 100, or 10 times 10 is 100. So that's how it kind of shows if I have something in tenths and something in hundredths, they're the same exact thing, right? I colored in just one really vertical bar on my grid, but in this one, since it's broken into tenths, I have 1 out of 10 colored in, but here I have 10 out of 100 colored in. All right, I'll let that kind of roll around in your brain a little bit, and we'll go on to another one. So let's move on next door. So let's say this time, I'm gonna color in 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, all right? So these are in our tenths grid, so I know the total number possible is always going to be my denominator. My numerator is how many of them are there all together that are counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4/10. Now, if I go directly below it and I start comparing tenths to hundredths, again, I'm still going to color in just 4 of these vertical rows, all right? But instead this time, since I don't have 10 like I had up here where there were just 10 of the vertical rows, I got 10 vertical rows and I got 10 horizontal rows, and 10 times 10 is 100. So my question now becomes, if this is 4/10, what is this same thing as 100, as an equivalent fraction for hundredths? Well, I could actually kind of sit here and count them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 6, 7, 38, 39, 40. Or, which is the right answer, it's 40 hundredths is equivalent to 4/10, all right? You can just realize, well, if there's 10 in this row, there's 10, 20, 30, 40. Either strategy is fine, but as long as you can kind of make that connection, that 4/10 and 40 hundredths are equivalent fractions, all right? Now, instead of erasing, I'm gonna try to do something over here. All right, I'm gonna work backwards on this one. So let's say I'm gonna take 1 and 2, and I'm going to color in 2 of those. What is the fraction of those tenths that I have colored in? Again, I hear you shouting out 2 out of 10. So that's 2/10, okay? Well, how many hundredths would 2/10 be? Again, I think I hear you shouting out, oh, I get it, I get it. All I'm doing is I'm taking this times 10, and that's going to give me the equivalent fraction because 10 times 10 is 100. You're right, 2 times 10 is 20. And again, if I were to color these in just to kind of see it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, or 10, 20, 2/10, 20 hundredths, they're the same thing. So if I were going to pull back and take a look at my original place value chart that I showed you, if I had 1/10, the equivalent hundredth would be 10 hundredths, all right? And remember, one number after the decimal is always tenths, so I say this 1/10, and I have 10 hundredths, which is always 2 numbers after the decimal, okay? Now the other examples we did, what if I have a 4 here in the tenths? Well, that is 4 tenths. How many hundredths is 4 tenths? It's got to be 40 hundredths, which I write like that, okay? The other example that we did, that we just kind of squeezed on there, what if I have 2 in my tenths? How do I write 2 tenths as a decimal? 0.2. How do I write it as a hundredth if I have it right there? Well, one place value over is 10 times more, so that's going to be 20 hundredths. And how do I write that as a decimal? 20 hundredths. Now, the cool thing is that really by saying this decimal, you can actually figure out the fraction. So how do you say this? Well, one number after the decimal is tenths, so this is called 2 tenths. Guess how you write 2 tenths as a fraction? 2 tenths. Wow, mind-blowing. Is your brain hurting right now? Okay, let's try this one. This is 20 in the hundredths. I say this as 20 hundredths. Guess how you say that decimal as a fraction? 20 hundredths. So these two things and these two things, these two decimals and fractions and these two decimals and fractions are equivalent fractions, right? 2 tenths, 2 tenths. 20 hundredths, 20 hundredths. These are the exact same thing going down this way. These are equivalent fractions. If I have 2 tenths or 20 hundredths, look, we did the work right here. Here I've got 2 tenths or 20 hundredths. Those are equivalent fractions. Now, if we were in class and I had a lot more time with you, we'd be doing a lot more examples together, but I just kind of want to set the stage for where we're going to be going the rest of the week with this. So this is going to kind of end the lesson for today, all right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video because it's a little bit longer so I can get it uploaded to you, and then I'm going to post one more video that has the homework for tonight, and I'll kind of walk through that with you, all right?